Greetings, dear friends. You are watching Ruslan Belov's channel. Today we will take a detailed look at the situation in Ukraine as of January 27, 2026. Over the past 24 hours, a truly large number of significant and high-profile events have occurred, so without unnecessary introductions, let us move straight to the analysis of the situation. Ukrainian official structures, as well as sources supporting Kiev, are expressing serious concern. According to their data, for 4 consecutive days, Russian unmanned aerial vehicles have been actively operating in Ukraine's airspace, carrying out additional reconnaissance missions, primarily in areas where energy infrastructure facilities are located. Today, the Ukrainian side published a corresponding map covering the period from January 23 to January 27. This map clearly shows next-generation BM-35 drones flying over various regions of Ukraine and conducting follow-up reconnaissance of targets. What distinguishes these drones from earlier models? These reconnaissance platforms are equipped with the Starlink satellite communication system, which provides them with direct satellite connectivity. As a result, suppressing them using electronic warfare systems becomes extremely difficult, effectively almost impossible. Based on the published map, it can be seen that Russian drones are operating over cities such as Kiev and Zhytomyr, as well as over the territories of the Kiev and Dnipropetrovsk regions. In addition, high drone activity has been recorded over the Chernihiv region, including directly above the city of Chernihiv. Individual drones were also observed operating in a western direction toward Lviv. If we take a closer look at the situation involving the drone operating near Lviv, information emerged today indicating that, as a result of the reconnaissance mission, a fuel and lubricant storage facility was likely identified. After the target was detected, a strike was promptly carried out against this facility. Sources report that the depot was hit and destroyed in the area of the town of Brody. The released footage shows the aftermath of the strike. Thus, reconnaissance was first conducted using drones equipped with satellite communications, followed by a precise fire strike. Additional video materials from the same direction have also appeared. A dense column of acrid smoke can be seen rising above the settlement. Apparently, this strike was operational in nature, meaning the target was identified and almost immediately struck. When looking at the situation as a whole, the main objective of such reconnaissance activity is obvious: to gather the maximum possible amount of information and prepare the conditions for the next large-scale strike. Weather conditions should also be mentioned separately. According to forecasts, the current week is expected to be relatively mild, with air temperatures ranging from 0 to -4 degrees Celsius. However, closer to February 1st, a sharp drop in temperature is expected, with thermometers potentially falling to -20 degrees Celsius. Based on this, it can be assumed that intelligence collection is being carried out with the expectation of launching a new large-scale strike shortly before the onset of severe cold. Ukraine's Ministry of Defense also reports that over the past 24 hours, the Russian side employed 165 unmanned aerial vehicles. At the same time, Ukrainian sources claim that 135 of them were shot down by air defense systems. This is how the situation stands at the moment. However, these are not all of the important developments. Today, or rather the day before, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, apparently signed another law extending the mobilization regime and martial law. According to available information, the current or next phase of mobilization, as well as the state of martial law, will be extended until May 4, 2026. In addition, a number of sources report that the United States has set a certain deadline for the Ukrainian leadership. Some channels claim that the United States expects a peace settlement to be reached by May 15th. If no agreement is achieved after that date, the United States, according to these reports, intends to withdraw from the conflict and cease further involvement, including support for Ukraine. Next, we move to the situation in the Kharkiv region, from where a significant amount of information is coming in. Let me remind you that the day before, there was a kind of exchange of strikes between Kharkiv and Belgorod. The sides carried out mutual attacks using drones and missile systems. Russian sources published several videos and photographs demonstrating these events. The footage shows the operation of Russian air defense systems. A small portion of the night sky is visible, and the characteristic sounds of air defense activity can be clearly heard. apparently recorded in the Belgorod region near the city of Belgorod. Later, closer to nighttime, the Russian side began carrying out retaliatory mass strikes on Kharkiv. As a result of the attacks, communication lines were damaged, leading to a noticeable deterioration in internet connectivity during the strikes. Information was also received about damage to energy infrastructure facilities. Power outages occurred once again in the city of Kharkiv. The published footage shows the moment when the lights in the city go out after another strike. Kharkiv's military administration reports that as of the end of January 26th, about 80% of the city's consumers remained without electricity. At the same time, power supply problems were recorded not only in Kharkiv itself, but also in other settlements across the region, including Chuhuiv and Izium, as well as a number of other towns and villages. In addition, during the night, the Russian side carried out a massive strike on the city of Odessa and the Odessa region. A large amount of video material has also emerged from this direction, apparently showing the consequences of the strikes. The footage shows emergency and municipal services in Odessa taking measures to stabilize the situation and deal with the aftermath. From different angles, the same damaged building is shown. Based on the presented materials, it can be assumed that the strike was directed at a specific structure. The footage then shows the consequences of a fire that broke out immediately after the impact. Additional videos from Odessa were also published. They show nighttime conditions, with a timestamp of 2:58 a.m., and most likely capture the moment a drone strikes a building in the central part of the city. We will closely monitor how events and the overall situation continue to develop. There is a growing sense that previously the Russian Federation did not approach reconnaissance activities with this level of systematization and thoroughness. At least, this is what both Ukrainian and Russian sources are now pointing out, noting a more serious and detailed approach to analysis and preparation. Now let us move directly to the line of active combat. Over the past 24 hours, a large number of significant video materials have been published. We begin with the northern part of the Sumy region. In footage released by the Russian side, a cargo truck, a heavy freight vehicle, can be seen. According to the video's author, this vehicle was transporting unmanned aerial vehicles. The truck was struck using the Tornado S multiple launch rocket system. As seen in the footage, the strike was carried out almost in the northernmost part of the Sumy region. As a rule, it is precisely from this area, the northern part of the Sumy region, as well as slightly farther west from the territory of the Chernihiv region, that strikes deep into Russian territory using the same types of drones were most frequently launched in the past. Another extremely important video confirmation today came from the area of the settlement of Lozova. In fact, this is one of the key logistics hubs of the armed forces of Ukraine. Let me remind you that during December and January of 2025-2026, the Russian Federation managed to inflict very serious damage on Ukraine's railway infrastructure along the section between the Dnipropetrovsk region, the city of Zaporizhia, and the line of contact. Previously, bridges in the area of the settlement of Pavlohrad were damaged or completely put out of operation, as well as slightly farther east, near Sinelnikov. As a result, the railway lines from Pavlohrad toward Serhivka and Mezhova, as well as the line from Sinelnikov toward Malomikhailivka, apparently are no longer functioning. In addition, there are other problematic nodes. One of them is the logistics hub in the area of Lozova. This is one of the last major transport and logistics points currently used by Ukrainian forces to transfer reserves and reinforcements to the front line. Accordingly, significant forces are concentrated precisely in the Lozova area. In this area, within forested zones, shelter belts and tree lines, various units, operational reserves and equipment are covertly deployed. In the event of a sharp escalation, it is from here that units are redeployed both toward the Zaporizhia direction and toward the areas of Druzhkivka and Kostiantinivka, as well as toward Dobropillya. In addition, from this same sector, forces can be transferred in the direction of Lyman and beyond. In the video footage published by the Russian side, we can observe another group of Ukrainian equipment that was most likely planned for deployment to the front line in the near future. The footage shows various types of equipment and vehicles: trucks, heavy freight vehicles, possibly passenger cars, as well as armored vehicles. As soon as this parking area was detected and recorded, it was almost immediately struck. The Russian side employed Iskander operational tactical missiles. The footage clearly shows at least 3 impacts. 3 Iskander missiles struck the target with high accuracy, either directly within the shelter belt or at a minimal distance from it. As a result of the strike, this staging area was apparently completely disabled and possibly fully destroyed. Now let us move directly to the front line itself, starting with the Kupiansk sector, from where, over the past 24 hours, some of the most high-profile and even sensational reports have emerged. As many experts are already noting, today the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, Valery Gerasimov, stated that Russian units had achieved substantial and significant advances in the area of the settlement of Kupiansk-Uzlovyi. Based on this statement, certain adjustments suggest themselves. However, if one carefully analyzes the maps published by most well-known and authoritative mappers and OSINT analysts, it becomes evident that none of them are in a hurry to make changes. A number of experts directly point out that such information may represent what is known as an advance on credit. For this reason, everyone is now awaiting additional confirmation, first and foremost in the form of video evidence. In particular, many are expecting footage showing Russian flags within the boundaries of the settlement of Kupiansk-Uzlovyi. Until such evidence appears, the majority of analysts are refraining from updating their maps. Moreover, some reliable pro-Russian sources and major analytical channels also note that the current information may not fully correspond to the actual situation on the ground. Nevertheless, if we conditionally take the statement of the Chief of the General Staff as a baseline, then, in the event that Russian advances in Kupiansk-Uzlovyi are confirmed, it would be possible to say that the fighting for the northern part of the so-called Kupiansk pocket has effectively come to an end. Let me remind you that if we look at the situation as of September 1, 2025, the map in this sector appeared as follows. At that time, there existed the so-called Kupiansk pocket, and if we compare the information that was coming in regarding the areas of Kupiansk, Petropavlivka, Kucherivka, Kurilivka, Pishchane and Kupiansk-Uzlovyi with the most recent reports, a picture emerges in which Russian units managed to effectively split the entire Kupiansk direction into 2 separate sectors, northern and southern. As of January 26–27, 2026, according to available data, Russian units were able to fully pass through the entire northern segment of this Kupiansk pocket. Now let us return to the current date and see what the map looks like today. In its present form, the northern part of the Kupiansk pocket appears to have been completed and brought to its logical conclusion. It is possible that isolated pockets of resistance remain, but overall, the situation in this sector is close to being resolved. At present, the Russian army is gradually shifting its main focus to the southern part of the Kupiansk pocket. This concerns just 3 settlements: Hlushkivka, Novusinov, and Kovsharivka. Already today, the first video materials and geolocations are appearing that indicate powerful aerial bomb strikes against Ukrainian positions in the area of the settlement of Kovsharivka. These images may point to the beginning of an active phase of combat for the final southern segment of the Kupiansk direction. Indirectly, this may also confirm that fighting in the northern part has indeed concluded, although the Chief of the General Staff separately emphasized that security operations are still ongoing in this direction. According to him, a significant amount of work remains ahead in this area. Nevertheless, it is possible that we are witnessing a turning point on this section of the front. Naturally, everyone without exception is awaiting the appearance of video evidence that would allow changes to be made to maps, not on the basis of statements, but on the basis of confirmed facts. Next, we move to the Sloviansk sector of the front, from where a large volume of information is also coming in. Today, many geolocations have been published from this direction, making it possible to adjust the map and state that the Russian army continues its advance westward. Let us recall what the map looked like as of January 20, 2026. It was during this period that an active offensive toward the Sloviansk thermal power plant began. Since then, the map in this sector has been adjusted almost daily, and today is no exception. Video footage has emerged from the southern part of the settlement of Nikiforivka. The footage shows Russian assault or sabotage groups attempting to advance northward, using buildings, structures, and fortified positions for cover. In response, the Ukrainian side is attempting to strike the advancing units. A similar situation is developing in the area of Svit-Pokrovsky. Russian units are trying to infiltrate through Ukrainian defensive lines, creating a threat of envelopment. In response, Ukrainian FPV drone operators are actively at work, attempting to detect Russian groups and strike them. As a result, the advance is proceeding gradually, without sudden breakthroughs. The pace of the offensive remains low, but it is sustained, and maps are being adjusted almost daily in favor of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Next, we move to the Kostiantynivka sector of the front. At this moment, no significant changes have been recorded here. The only addition to the map is a small zone of uncertainty marked between the First Pond and the Kryvyi Torets River. Thus, this area clearly shows that it is precisely here that the main forces and the primary focus of FPV drone operators of the armed forces of the Russian Federation are concentrated. The reason for this is that through this narrow stretch of terrain, there is effectively the only remaining route for Ukrainian units to supply the garrison located in the southern part of Kostiantynivka. At present, there are essentially no alternative supply routes. Full fire and visual control has been established over the Kryvyi Torets River, and all crossings over the river have been destroyed. In addition, slightly farther west, there are natural obstacles in the form of reservoirs and extensive water bodies, which further limit maneuverability. As a result, the movement of units and equipment is possible exclusively through this narrow bottleneck. Accordingly, everything that enters Kostiantynivka through this section is under constant observation. All movements are detected, calculated, and controlled. As a result, any equipment that appears in this area within a short period of time, sometimes hours and sometimes even minutes, is either destroyed or comes under fire. After this, the Ukrainian side is forced to withdraw its forces northward toward Oleksievo-Druzhkivka. At the moment, a waiting tactic is being observed in this sector. The Russian side is deliberately attempting to exhaust Ukrainian units located in the southern part of Kostiantynivka as much as possible. In terms of losses and wear on Ukrainian forces, the time factor is undoubtedly working in favor of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. However, if we consider the issue of overall advancement in the Kostiantynivka area, time, on the contrary, is beginning to work against further progress, since the spring period is not far off. Next, we move to the Dobropillya direction, from where a significant amount of information is also coming in. The key point here is that the Chief of the General Staff confirms the presence of active combat operations and fierce fighting for such settlements as Belitske, Hryshyn, and Novyi Donbass. All of these settlements have been regularly adjusted on maps over the past several days. If we look at the dynamics over the past 24 hours, they appear as follows. The Chief of the General Staff confirms the presence of Russian units within the territory of Belitske, and also reports that units of the armed forces of the Russian Federation are already operating within the settlement of Novyi Donbass. As for Novyi Donbass, there are both geolocations and video materials confirming the presence of Russian units. Thus, as of the end of January 27th, it can be said that at least about 33% of the territory of Novyi Donbass is likely under relatively stable and confident control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Next, we move to the Zaporizhia sector of the front, from where a large number of updates are also coming in. Speaking about the eastern Zaporizhia direction, let me remind you that the most recent confirmed information was a report stating that Russian units had managed to establish positions in the southern part of the settlement of Zhelezhnodorozhne. However, over the past 24 hours, no additional information from this sector has been received so far. At the same time, extremely important developments are unfolding in the western Zaporizhia direction. Today, the Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation once again reported that the Russian army had significantly improved its positions in the area of the settlement of Novoyakivlivka. The map adjustments over the past 24 hours look as follows. Whereas yesterday, January 26th, the map had one appearance, today it already looks different. These changes were made on the basis of a report from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. At the same time, there are currently no video materials that could visually confirm this information. Therefore, all analysts and observers remain in a waiting mode. It is possible that video evidence confirming the presence of Russian units in this area will be published in the near future. Nevertheless, if this information is confirmed, it will be possible to confidently speak about the formation of a full-fledged bridgehead. Most likely, in the near future, the Russian army will focus its efforts on restoring and establishing control over the Mali-Shcherbaki road, and then advancing toward Pavlivka and Novoyakivlivka. Once control over this road is secured, the logistical capabilities of the armed forces of the Russian Federation from this bridgehead will significantly improve and expand. After that, one can expect the start of a more powerful offensive, primarily in the eastern direction, toward the Orekhiv agglomeration. By the way, the distance from Novoyakivlivka to the Orekhiv agglomeration is approximately 11 kilometers. This is already quite close, and most likely active combat operations on the western outskirts of Orekhiv and within the Orekhiv agglomeration will begin much earlier than the Vostok group of forces approaches Orekhiv from the eastern direction. In effect, an offensive is forming simultaneously from two directions. At the same time, the Dnipro group of forces currently appears fresher and is advancing at a more confident pace. This is apparently due to the fact that for a long time this grouping remained in reserve and was only relatively recently fully committed. For this reason, the pace of its advance is noticeably higher compared to the Vostok group of forces, which has been conducting offensive operations almost continuously for about a year. That is all for today, dear friends. Thank you for your attention and for staying with us. Subscribe to the channel, support the release with your likes, and all the best to you.